Welcome back to Physiology on Catalyst University. My name is Kevin Tokoph. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. In this video, we're going to be discussing the functions of the electron transport chain and how they relate to oxidative phosphorylation. So here's kind of a summary slide that we looked at in some of the previous videos. So on the left here, we pretty much have glycolysis. Okay, and then over on the right side here, inside this yellow box, this represents the mitochondria, and we talked about the beta oxidation pathway for the metabolism of fatty acids. And notice that in glycolysis, we generate pyruvate, which can be transported into the mitochondria and converted into acetyl-CoA. The products of beta oxidation are also acetyl-CoA molecules, and so those acetyl-CoA molecules from beta oxidation and glycolysis ultimately can go into this cycle right here called the Krebs cycle. And in the course of the Krebs cycle, per acetyl-CoA, we end up getting 2 carbon dioxides, which are waste products, an ATP, and then we also get NADH, that is 3 of them per acetyl-CoA, and 1 FADH2 per acetyl-CoA. Okay. We also end up getting a net 2 NADH from glycolysis, which then goes into the mitochondria. And then while in beta oxidation, per round of beta oxidation, we get 1 FADH2 and 1 NADH. All those NADHs and FADH2s I mentioned behave sort of like batteries for the electron transport chain. So we're going to find out in this video what that means. So first, let's take a look at the electron transport chain and get oriented with how this is set up relative to the cell. So out here, okay, this is going to be the cytosol of the cell. This membrane is actually the outer mitochondrial membrane. Remember that the mitochondria is a double-membraned organelle. This membrane deep to the outer mitochondrial membrane is the inner mitochondrial membrane, and the space between these two membranes is the intermembrane space. There's really not a whole lot of significance that actually takes place here. And then deep to the inner mitochondrial membrane, this space in here is called the matrix of the mitochondria, or the mitochondrial matrix. Notice down here, this is actually where the Krebs cycle, also called citric acid cycle and TCA cycle, takes place, in the matrix of the mitochondria. Now, out in the cytoplasm up here, remember this is where glycolysis occurs. Okay? Now, situated in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, we have a bunch of proteins right here. They're embedded in the membrane, and they're collectively termed the electron transport chain. So the electron transport chain is composed of 4 proteins, each called complexes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, they all have a specific name. For example, complex 1 is called NADH dehydrogenase. Complex 3 is cytochrome C reductase. But for simplicity, we usually use complexes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And again, they're sandwiched in the inner mitochondrial membrane. Over here, we have another protein that's sandwiched in the membrane, and it's called ATP synthase. And as we're going to see in a little bit, this is the enzyme that's going to generate ATP. And it's going to do so by combining ADP and inorganic phosphate. And when it lumps those two things together, we get ATP. Now here's the thing. ATP synthase will not function by itself. Its action has to be coupled with the actions of these proteins that constitute the electron transport chain. And in order for these proteins to work, complexes 1 and 2 respectively have to have NADH and FADH2. Okay? So let's actually look at an analogy for how the electron transport chain actually works. You might say to yourself, well, why do I have this set up right here? What does that have to do with the electron transport chain? Well, it functions very similarly to this. So in this setup, I have a tank of water up here. I have a tank of water down here. And the water is going to leave this tank up here. It's going to move in this direction. And it's going to come across this wheel. And it's going to spin the wheel. And then the water is going to be caught in the second basin down here. Okay. Now, I have a water wheel. Now, water wheels are generally used not for just aesthetic purposes. They have some function. So as the wheel spins, it may be coupled to producing hydroelectricity, or maybe it's just some function on a farm. We've seen these in Skyrim if you've ever played that game before. So they're used for some purpose. The spinning of the wheel is coupled to something else. And if this water stops moving, the wheel stops moving, and whatever the wheel does, that stops as well. Now in this setup right here, the water, it's a finite amount of water in this top basin. It's going to be moving here and caught by the bottom basin. Now what would happen if there was no way to return the water down here up to right here? Well, if there was no way to return that, then eventually this water in the top basin would drop, and then there would be really none left in there, and then the wheel would stop because no water is actually moving out of it to turn it. So in this setup, we have to have a way to move this water in the bottom basin back up to the top. And so we have to have two things coupled to one another. We have to have the water from the bottom basin move back up to the top, and that's coupled with the water moving from the top back to the bottom, and in doing so turning this wheel. And the reason I mentioned this is because this is very similar to how the electron transport chain and overall oxidative phosphorylation is set up. So in the electron transport chain, we're going to see pumping of protons. Proton is just hydrogen ions, H+, that's another term for it, proton. And so we're going to have protons in the mitochondrial inner membrane space. Okay? That's what this top basin represents. The bottom basin represents protons in the mitochondrial matrix. Okay? Now, these complexes, in particular 1, 3, and 4, not 2, we'll talk about why that is in a minute, they're called proton pumps. And what they're going to do is they're going to pump protons from the mitochondrial matrix into the inner membrane space. Okay? That's an active transport. They're not using ATP to do it. They're actually using electrons from NADH and FADH2. But we'll talk about that later on. These complexes, 1, 3, and 4, are pumping protons from the matrix into the inner membrane space. That's an uphill or active transport. Then, the downhill part of this transport is then these protons are able to actually move from the inner membrane space back into the mitochondrial matrix. And the way they're actually going to do that is they're actually going to move through a specific tunnel in ATP synthase, and when they move through that tunnel, it actually causes ATP synthase to spin, just like this water wheel would. And just like this water wheel would be coupled to something like something producing hydroelectricity, ATP synthase, the spinning, is coupled to the actual generation of ATP from ADP and inorganic phosphate. Okay? So, again, the proton pumps will pump hydrogen ions from the matrix into the inner membrane space, and then those hydrogen ions will simply move back into the matrix, but they don't do it just in some facilitated diffusion. They actually move through a channel in ATP synthase, causing ATP synthase to rotate. And when it rotates, it generates ATP. So the proton pumps are coupled to the phosphorylation of ADP to make ATP. All right, let's look and see how this works in just a little bit of detail. Remember this NADH and FADH2 that were generated by the Krebs cycle, by glycolysis, and through beta oxidation? Well, those cofactors like NADH and FADH2, they make their way ultimately into the mitochondrial matrix. Now, since the Krebs cycle and beta oxidation are already in the mitochondrial matrix, they're already present here. Okay? The NADH from glycolysis has to be transported from the cytoplasm, or cytosol, across the outer mitochondrial membrane, across the inner membrane space, and across the inner mitochondrial membrane to make its way into the matrix. But in any case, they all end up in the matrix. Now, the substrate for complex 1 is NADH. The substrate for complex 2 is going to be FADH2. All right? Now, the idea here is that NADH and FADH2 carry electrons because technically in their production, they're the result of oxidation-reduction reactions. So these two molecules are carrying electrons. And what NADH will do is it will transfer its electrons to complex 1. FADH2 will transfer its electrons to complex 2. And ultimately what these proteins do is they collectively shuttle their electrons to complex 3. Okay? So they do it independent of one another. Complex 1 will take electrons from NADH and shuttle them to complex 3. Complex 2 will take electrons from FADH2 and shuttle them to complex 3. You can see that in the schematic right here. Now that's significant because complex 1 actually pumps protons from the matrix right here into the inner membrane space. Now complex 2 does not do this because complex 2 is actually part of the Krebs cycle. Okay, that's actually an interesting fact about this protein. This is actually an enzyme in the Krebs cycle. It just happens to be in the inner mitochondrial membrane. So complex 2 does not pump protons. Only complexes 1, 3, and 4 do that. So what's happening here? NADH transfers its electrons to complex 1, which then transfers its electrons to complex 3. That results in the pumping of protons from the matrix into the inner membrane space. Again, complex 2 does take electrons from FADH2 and shuttle them to complex 3, but complex 2 does not pump protons. All right, so now we're at a situation where complex 3 has all these electrons that originally came from complexes 2 and 1. So complex 3 will then take its electrons and shuttle them to complex 4. Okay? You can see how this is an electron transport chain. Complex 1 and 2 transport electrons to complex 3. Complex 3 then transports those electrons to complex 4. Now complex 3 will pump protons in a very similar manner to complex 1. So right around the time that complex 3 is transporting those electrons to complex 4, complex 3 also pumps protons from the matrix into the inner membrane space. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, all these electrons are moving toward complex 4, and complex 4 is the final protein right here. So where would the electrons go from complex 4? Because if these electrons that are now at complex 4 have nowhere to go, then the entire system will back up. It's kind of like if you have a sink and you close the drain and continue to run the faucet, eventually the sink's going to fill up with water. The water has nowhere to go. So in other words, you have to have a place for the final electrons to go. So that way this pathway can keep moving forward. If there's no place to put these electrons from complex 4, you're in serious trouble. Luckily, there's a molecule that'll come in here to pick up those electrons from complex 4. That molecule is oxygen, O2. And this is why we typically think of oxygen as the final electron acceptor, because the final electrons at complex 4, instead of going to another protein, there is no other protein, they actually go to oxygen. And so oxygen is converted, or we'll say reduced, to water, H2O. So those electrons, they move from complex 1 to complex 3, complex 2 to complex 3, and then from complex 3 to complex 4, and then from complex 4 to oxygen. And that results in water, which is harmless, right? Now, just like complexes 3 and 1, complex 4 also pumps protons. And so as complex 3 is transporting those electrons to oxygen, it pumps protons from the matrix into the inner membrane space. So let's regroup with where we are. We've just transported electrons beginning with NADH and FADH2 through a series of electron carriers, ultimately to oxygen, which is reduced to water. But in doing so, all these protons are being pumped from the matrix into the inner membrane space. So I want to say two things right here. One, this pumping of protons is active transport. It does not directly require ATP. It's actually using these electron transfers as the energy required to pump the protons. So whereas a normal primary active transporter would use ATP hydrolysis to move something against its concentration gradient, these proteins are actually using electron flow to move something, as in the proton, against its concentration gradient. The second thing is, notice now we have a proton gradient. We have a lot of protons here in the inner membrane space, a lot less in the matrix. Again, all these protons being built up in the inner membrane space is done so by the action of these proton pumps. And this is very important because now this concentration gradient says we have lots of protons in the inner membrane space, very few in the matrix. So if we were to imagine what direction these protons would move if they were allowed to simply diffuse across the inner mitochondrial membrane, they would move from high concentration up here to low concentration in the matrix. And even though they can't cross this membrane by simple diffusion, it turns out that ATP synthase has this little channel in it that allows protons to move from the inner membrane space through this channel back into the matrix. And this occurs down its concentration gradient. All right? Now, as these protons are being moved through this channel, that actually triggers ATP synthase to rotate. ATP synthase is a good example of a molecular motor. So just like this water wheel right here that turns as water is being moved across it, ATP synthase rotates as hydrogen ions move through its channel. Okay? These hydrogen ions are like the water. So as they move through this, it triggers ATP synthase to rotate. And why is that important? Because as ATP synthase rotates, it combines ADP and phosphate to make ATP. Okay? That's extremely important to understand. And this synthesis of ATP, this gets us a lot of ATP. So whereas glycolysis maybe only got us a net of 2 ATP, and for the Krebs cycle, 1 acetyl-CoA would just give us 1 ATP. If we were to look at the complete cycle of this electron transport chain, it would actually give us a whopping 32 ATP. This process that I just described where we get all this ATP, this is called oxidative phosphorylation. Why is it called oxidative phosphorylation? Well, here's the phosphorylation. We phosphorylate ADP to make ATP. Where's the oxidation or oxidative part? Well, it's here at the NADH and FADH2. It turns out that when NADH gives its electrons to complex 1 and when FADH2 gives its electrons to complex 2, that's an oxidation reaction. So oxidation is coupled to phosphorylation. Oxidative phosphorylation. Proton pumps, which are oxidative because of these electron transfers, are coupled to the phosphorylation via ATP synthase. And this process gives us all that ATP. All right? So hopefully this process makes sense to you, and you can now see the purpose of these NADH and FADH2 molecules as batteries for the electron transport chain. Complexes 1, 3, and 4 pump these protons, create a concentration gradient of these protons where they're high in the inner membrane space, and then they rush back through ATP synthase, power its spinning or its rotation, which then powers its coupling of ADP and phosphate to make ATP. Please make sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for future videos and notifications. Thank you.